Thank you so much for joining us today for a celebration of the American Museum of Science and Energy. I am Alan Lowe. I serve as director of the museum as well as a member of the American Museum of Science and Energy Foundation. That foundation is presenting this program today with great assistance from the museum staff and other supporters of the work of AMSE. AMSE has been a part of the Oak Ridge community since 1949, the oldest science and energy museum in the nation. Since its founding, AMSE has welcomed visitors, thousands of visitors from all around the world. In addition to teaching about the Manhattan Project, where Oak Ridge got its incredible start, we pay tribute every day to the amazing work underway at Oak Ridge National Lab and at the Y-12 National Security Complex, as well as the ongoing work of DOE's Office of Environmental Management. Our world is impacted positively each and every day by the work being done right here in East Tennessee, and it's our privilege at AMSE to help tell that story. At the same time, we know the vital importance of teaching STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, to students of all ages. And through our exhibits and our programs, we serve as a mighty STEAM engine. I should note that we also oversee the wonderful new K-25 History Center, located at the site of the old K-25 gaseous diffusion plant. As with AMSE, the K-25 History Center is a tremendous resource to learn about the history of the Manhattan Project and the functions of K-25, as well as the science and engineering that was part of that world-changing work. We want to keep being a vital part of the life of this community that we love so much, and to continue teaching important lessons of science and engineering and history, but we need your help to do this. I ask that you consider today donating to the AMSE Foundation or becoming members of the museum, or both. With your support, we can continue and grow our important efforts. You will hear today about some of the things we are doing and planning to do in the future, all with the aim of being a great, fun, engaging educational resource for this community and beyond. I want to thank up front all those who helped out with the program today, with special thanks to Matt Mullins for his many talents in putting this entire program together. We believe in AMSE. We cherish our history, and we are excited about what we can accomplish together with you in the future. We ask for your help today as we move forward. You can donate by calling 865-294-4531 or going online to amse.org. You can also mail checks to 115 Main Street East, Oak Ridge, Tennessee 37830. Ray Smith has been a long-time board member with the AMSE Foundation. He's known throughout the region as an expert on the history of the people, places, workers, and work done surrounding the Manhattan Project. I had the opportunity to talk about history and get some perspective from a man who knows a thing or two about those important projects. At AMSE and K-25, we teach about the truly awe-inspiring Manhattan Project, an incredible story of a massive effort that won a war, that changed the world, and created the city we're standing in right now, Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Our exhibit at AMSE begins with the section dedicated to the Manhattan Project and the vital role that Oak Ridge played. At the K-25 History Center, we focus even more on the Manhattan Project, the creation of Oak Ridge, and especially the vital work done at the K-25 plant, where uranium was processed to help prepare the way to an atomic bomb. We're joined today by Ray Smith, historian of the city of Oak Ridge, a veteran of some 47 years at Y-12 National Security Complex, and a very wonderful member of the AMSE Foundation Board. So, Ray, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
Let me start with the basics.
Okay.
Why did they choose Tennessee and this specific location for this part of Manhattan?
That's an interesting story that I use every time I introduce the story of Oak Ridge. And what I love most about it is I got to interview Senator Howard Baker before he passed away, and he used the same story. Now, you may think that it's because of the lay of the land, the proximity to Norristown, inland from the sea. No, the real truth is when Albert Einstein wrote that letter to President Roosevelt saying Germany's buying up all this uranium ore and he's afraid they're going to make a bomb, he knew it would be expensive to look into that uranium situation. So he put General Groves in charge of the Manhattan Project. Groves had just finished building the Pentagon, so he knew how to put a large construction project together, knew how to get private industry involved, and he knew how to spend money. So President Roosevelt also called in Senator McKellar. And he said, Senator, I need to put a large amount of money against the war effort, and I can't let the press or anyone know how much it is or what it's being used for. Can you help me with that? Senator McKellar said, yes, Mr. President, I can do that for you. Just where in Tennessee are you going to put that thing? But the reason was to separate the uranium-235 from the natural uranium to get, they knew that they needed that 235. In 1,000 pounds of uranium ore, there's only 7 pounds of 235.
Wow.
It's very difficult to get that separated. So that's why they built the Y12 plant. They also built the X10 Graphite Reactor to prove you could produce plutonium, the other product that could be used to make an atomic bomb. So they proved that principle here and then went out to Hanford, Washington and built 3 reactors on the Columbia River up there, and that's where they got the plutonium. But all the uranium that went in Little Boy came from Oak Ridge, and that was the driver. They thought they were in a race with Germany, and they needed that uranium. Even Great Britain realized the importance of it and said, look, we don't have the resources to do it. You're going to do that, we'll send our scientists over. Now, by August of 1945, they had 22,482 people working at Y12 on 1,152 calutrons, batch processes. Very labor-intensive process to get that special little bit of uranium-235.
And different ways of producing that in the different plants, right?
Yeah,
so that's what amazed me, is they're building these buildings as they're still seeing if that will work.
Started Y12 and on July the 1st, started the X10 on the 2nd of 1943, they started X10. Then in June or July of that same year, they started the K25 gaseous diffusion process. Now, that turned out to be the one that eventually, by December of 1946, was the process of choice, because you could operate it for 1/10 of what it cost to run Y12. But during the Manhattan Project, the Y12 process was the ones they were relying on. By March of 1945, they began to get some feed material from the K25 site into the beta calutrons at Y12. And S50, one that's not very often realized, that thermal diffusion plant was built by the steam plant, largest one in the world at the time, built at K25. Now they didn't have the barrier material ready, so they couldn't run the gaseous diffusion, but they had that steam.
I see.
And Oppenheimer told General Graaff, said, look, we need to get a little more feed material to speed up the process. And the Navy is experimenting with thermal diffusion. So they wanted to build that. Now, quickly, General Graaff, being the driver that he is, went to the contractor and said, I need a thermal diffusion plant built. I need it built with this steam plant, and I need it in 90 days.
Oh my gosh.
The contractor said, that's impossible. It can't be done. Graaff looked him in the eye and said, you've got 80 days.
Oh my gosh.
They built it in 75 days, operated it for just a few months, and they calculate that by having that little addition up on the front end of the process, they shortened the war by 3 weeks.
Wow, wow.
It's an amazing process.
So at the end of the day, how many people worked here?
There were well over 100,000 people coming through at some time or the other. In August of 1945, there were 75,000 people living in the city of Oak Ridge, and there were about 80,000 working here. Now, they had a bus system, 850 buses. 9th largest bus system in the nation, going to all the surrounding cities and bringing workers in every day. Lester Fox and his brother saw that opportunity and bought 100 buses and made that bus system.
That is great.
Real quick Lester story. He said those buses broke down every day. And one day he had one behind a wrecker over in Clinton, a little city just east of here. And he saw another one of his buses broke down. So he pulled off right in front and put 2 of those buses behind that wrecker, tied them together with a log chain, put him a bus driver in there, and pulled out on the road. The policeman stopped him and said, Lester, you can't do that. Leave one of those buses and come back and get it. And he said, besides, I want you to meet me in the courthouse at 8:30 on Monday morning. Lester worried all weekend about what was going to happen to him. But he went, and when he got there, the policeman was already there. He said, "Lester, come with me." He took him down the hallway to the clerk's office, and he said, "Give this boy a driver's license." He was 14 years old when he got his driver's license.
Oh my gosh. It's good to have friends.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
There you go.
Alvin Weinberg, who was the director of the Oak Ridge National Lab for many years, was asked, "What's the most important contribution Oak Ridge has made to the world?" Without any hesitation, he said, "Medical isotopes."
Of course,
Helps millions of people every year. Same equipment, same science. It separated the uranium-235 for Little Boy. Also separated those stable isotopes that were sent over to the graphite reactor to produce nuclear medicine.
And Ray, you're anticipating my next question. What happened here after the Manhattan Project? It's a big part of the story we tell at AMSE.
Absolutely. It's an important part of the history of Oak Ridge. First thing that happened in 1946 was they held the first training program on nuclear reactors. Well, then Captain Rickover, later Admiral, of course, came down and attended that course. And he realized if you use highly enriched uranium, that U-235, you can build a reactor small enough to go in a submarine. That started the nuclear Navy. Same thing, the nuclear medicine we've already mentioned, that was huge. Experiments being done at the laboratory and even created a comparative animal research laboratory over on Scarborough Road there that did even further research into radiation and how it could be used to diagnose and to treat illnesses. Not only that, nuclear energy had its origin here. So many things. We even began to work with NASA over the years and now have uranium, they now have the plutonium-238 that's the power for all of the outer space exploration that's going on.
Amazing the things happening here right now. That's awesome. So tell me, why should folks support AMSE?
The American Museum of Science and Energy is just the most amazing resource that we have here in Oak Ridge. People for years have considered it to be the most important tourist attraction in Oak Ridge. Now we have several other museums now that are complementary, but still the American Museum of Science and Energy is the one that is most recognizable. And it's one that we need to continue to support because it does bring visitors to Oak Ridge.
Well, that does my heart good to hear you say that, Ray. I'm really proud of what we do in education. Certainly there's an economic impact being part of the cultural life of this community. Partnering with those other museums here in Knoxville, around the region as well, is an important part of what we do. Tell me about the AMSE Foundation. You're a great member of our foundation. Tell me about the role of that foundation.
I'm proud to be a part of that foundation. We've been working for years in support of the American Museum of Science and Energy. We had even had some workshops a few years ago where we brought in people from other museums that were very successful museums and looked at what could we do here in Oak Ridge to improve our outreach and what kind of transition should we be looking at. And we came away from that recognizing that all of those people said, look, we would die for the resource you've got here, for the history you've got here. You've got a potential that goes far beyond what you're doing now. So the foundation said, how can we take that and implement those changes, those improvements that were recommended by these well-respected, I mean, the World War II Museum was represented, the Air Force Museum was represented, we had Jim Walters from Albuquerque. So we decided that the foundation should take a much more active role than just a supportive role. So we're working now to actually begin to manage the museum. That's our goal, and we're working in partnership with the Department of Energy to take the museum and move it from just a DOE-based museum to one that's a community-based and even has national and maybe even international connections. So the foundation is excited by the opportunity that we think we're presented with.
We couldn't ask for a better foundation. Ray, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it as always.
You bet.
Our educational staff members, Corky, Kathleen, Linnell, and Chris, are phenomenal. Throughout this presentation, we're going to feature some of their work like this.
Kids explore nuclear science at AMSE. Nuclear science is about ionizing radiation. There are 3 ways of figuring out whether there's any ionizing radiation, and to protect yourself, it involves time, distance, and shielding. If you can wait long enough, all the radiation will dissipate and go away. It's the energy being given off by the atoms. But a lot of times we can't wait because uranium takes 4.6 billion years to decay into lead. What we do is we have a container of pennies representing these atoms, shake them out on the table, remove the heads, and they're the ones that have decayed. The tails stay in, and those are the ones that are still active. And so by doing this in a sequence of shakes, you can determine the half-life of an atom. Another way of determining whether there's any radiation is distance. And with a flashlight, if you shine it very close, that's going to be a more intense beam. The farther away you are, the less radiation you're going to be receiving, and way up here, very little radiation. So this is a good way of showing ionizing radiation. Can't see it, feel, taste, or hear it. So if I take one of our little sources, this is strontium-90, and put it on this ruler, and I'm going to turn our Geiger counter on, it shows how many beats or how many counts per second. I move it farther away, just like the flashlight, less radiation, ionizing radiation, and at 3 inches, very little. So that's another way of protecting yourself from radiation. The third is shielding. When you go to a dentist, they put a lead apron over you, and the nurse steps out, probably behind a concrete or lead shield. So if I turn my Geiger counter on and put a series of papers over the detector, you can see quite a bit of radiation is going through that paper. But if I put a piece of lead over the probe, put this, it stops it. So strontium-90 is giving off radiation, but lead shield stops that radiation. Another is cobalt-60. It is giving off a lot of ionizing radiation. If I put a piece of lead between it and the probe, it still goes through. So it is a gamma ray detector. So I have some examples of sources of radiation. This is an older Fiesta-ware dish. You can see that there's radiation being given off by the dish, not enough to be harmful. A Coleman lantern, like the small gas lanterns, this is the mantle. You light it and it gives that bright illumination. It has thorium in it. That's a radioactive material. It gives off alpha particles. Alpha particles can be stopped by your clothing or one sheet of paper. This watch face has radium paint on it to glow in the dark. It has a small amount of radioactivity, but it does glow in the dark. So ionizing radiation can't be seen, felt, tasted, or heard. You have to have a Geiger counter, an instrument that measures the amount of ionizing radiation. This is how kids explore nuclear science at AMSE.
Quinn Argel is our collections manager and museum curator. With the goal of bringing the latest technology to our guest experience, he is here to talk about our newest virtual reality stations.
I'm Quinn, and we've got this great new virtual reality setup. But instead of telling you about that today, I'm going to tell you about the path to virtual reality through history. Because everything that's happened before this is stuff that we still use today in our virtual reality. And I think that's really cool to learn about. So we're going to start actually before history, in prehistory, when people who were living or at least going into caves were drawing on these cave walls. And in some cases, they were actually even drawing onto projections on the walls that looked like animals already. When the cave light, that light from the fire, flickered and lit those animals up, it would make the animals look like they were running. So it was already early illusion. Now going forward, we had magicians, we had art that really tried to become more and more realistic with perspective and illusionism. And by the 1830s, we reach this whole new technology that really improves on that. And you may have heard of it. It's called photography. So here's an early example of photography. Not quite 1830s-ish, but at the same time that photography is being invented, so is a device called the stereoscope, which allows you to look at two images. In this case, we're going to use a photographic card in here, and it combines them. Lower the handle. In your mind, the two lenses will combine the image as I put it to my eyes, and I see a picture of women feeding birds in San Marcos Square. It's a remarkable little toy here. And that's actually what those headsets that you use in virtual reality still are just stereoscopes like this. But instead of this, you have little TV sets in there. But to get there, we need to go a little further. We're going to skip ahead a few decades toward the middle of the century when these toys suddenly become popular, like the phanakistoscope and the zoetrope, that create animated images so that you can actually see the pictures move. In the 20s, we even have the invention of the ViewMaster, which is just a smaller stereoscope. It really hasn't changed since this. I love the dinosaur one. I think everybody did, but what everybody also really loved was flicking that switch and hearing that sound as it clicks back. Good. There's not really much that happens other than other toys until the turn of the century when Edward Maybridge takes two of these zoetropes and a stereoscope, puts them together, and creates the first 3D animation. That becomes extremely popular in the early 20th century when we have 3D movies that use, as you might have seen, anaglyph glasses. The red and the blue lenses separate two different parts out of a single image that your brain then recombines to see a three-dimensional image. And shutter glasses, where one eye turns off and the other one turns off repetitively in a very irritating manner. And even polarized glasses, which we still use today if you go to the 3D movies. Slowly through the last century, we had other attempts to bring virtual reality to life. We had simulators come out. There's a guy called Morten Heilig, who's considered the father of VR, who creates his Sensorama, which surrounds you with sounds and lights and visuals. What leads to modern virtual reality is the University of Southern California has a mixed reality lab that they keep going through all these years. They come up with different haptic suits and walking treadmills. But one guy comes out of that, Palmer Luckey, and he decides, I'm going to make something at home that I want to turn into the new VR. And he's the guy who created Oculus, which we actually use in this museum to bring virtual reality to you. Now, why don't we go take a look at our virtual reality setup and see what we can do to bring the rest of the world, the universe, Mars, the space station, and ORNL right here in Oak Ridge to you using that system. Okay, so this is the headset. It's the first thing I'm going to put on. Just stretch the back here, put it over my face, and it takes just a moment to start up. I'm now inside. Now I'm essentially in my office. This is a large geodesic dome with a nice desk, a fire, and most importantly, my menu. I'm going to look at the menu right now and see what options I have. We could go to Mars, we could go to the space station, we could even practice magic, but today I think I'm just going to go to the space station. Okay, I am now going to explore the space station. I'm in 0G, so I'm floating here. If I can't grab anything, I can't move. And I can see a window up here, so I'm gonna go towards this window. Oh, don't want to hit the wall too hard, because even though I know it's virtual reality, it's still tricking me. So we're gonna launch myself. As I'm doing this, I just get a whole new feeling of being free of gravity, of exploring this. Probably looks hilarious seeing how I'm moving right now. and I almost floated free. We don't want to do that. I don't know how they put up with all these floating things around. Oh, and I hit a wall. Sure that you can see that. That's actually the toilet that I hit. I think we can possibly try to use it. We're not going to do that on camera. So we're going to go out of here, and right next to the toilet, as you would expect, is the best view on the space station. Into this area, and look out at Earth, which is just amazing. And if I look all around this dome, I can even find the Milky Way. There it is, past near that module. I just don't even know what it would have inspired in me if I had done this when I was a child and seen this spacesuit, for example. I hope that it would really inspire just feelings of wonder and excitement. I can even pick up the food. I hadn't tried that before. See, I'm getting excited by this just doing it right now. What is this? It's fancy tomato ketchup. Why do they have that? But it's time for me to get out of this and get back to the real world. We have this experience on the space station. We have the Mars experience right now. We have a few other games that we're experimenting with, and we are really looking forward to taking you inside of ORNL so that you can see all the amazing technology that they are developing right now.
David Keim is the Director of Communications at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. The lab's history is rich and vast, and the foundation of the work that was going to become one of the world's most impressive scientific communities.
I'm Dave Keim. I'm the Communications Director at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I previously was the Public Affairs Director at the Y-12 National Security Complex. So I've worked at two of the big facilities in Oak Ridge. The third is the K-25 site. And I want to tell you a little bit about Oak Ridge, and specifically about the graphite reactor, which became what we know today as Oak Ridge National Lab. The fact that there were three sites in Oak Ridge from the very beginning is a pretty interesting story that helps to explain how American science worked in the Manhattan Project and how remarkable that period of history was. You have to remember that scientists had only discovered nuclear fission a few years before the Manhattan Project started, in the midst of the buildup to World War II. James Chadwick confirmed the existence of a neutron in just 1932. And scientists began using neutrons for experiments. And in 1938, when two scientists in Germany, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, were studying uranium, they hit it with the neutrons, and it split into basically two equal parts. They were chemists, and this was a chemical result that they did not expect. So they asked one of their colleagues, Lisa Meitner, who was a theoretical physicist, why that might be. Now, Meitner had fled to Sweden because she had Jewish ancestry. And of course, in 1938 Germany, Hitler was rising to power. So through this correspondence, she thought about why the chemists might have gotten that result, and explained that perhaps it was like water droplets splitting into sort of two equal droplets, and the surface tension diminishes and it breaks apart into two equal parts. She said maybe that's what happened with the uranium atoms, where they split equally and released energy. She ran that through Einstein's E equal mc squared formula. The amount of mass that was lost matched expectations, and she told her colleagues, "You've discovered fission, nuclear fission." This was a huge breakthrough, and Niels Bohr, the famous Danish physicist, took the news to scientists in America, because he was headed to America for a conference, and the scientific community realized the ramifications of this discovery. And some of them said, what do we do with this? This was discovered in Nazi Germany. This could be a really bad thing. So some of the scientists, Leo Szilard in particular, in cooperation with Eugene Wigner, who would become the first research director here at Oak Ridge, and Edward Teller, both Nobel laureates, drove out to Einstein's house on Long Island and said, we need someone with your name to get people's attention. And we need Belgium to stop selling uranium to Nazi Germany because uranium was mined primarily in the Belgian Congo. And Einstein did that. And then Leo Szilard met a guy who knew the president, Alexander Sachs, and said, well, we need to get a letter from Einstein to the president that explains to the president what's going on. So that's where Leo Szilard and Edward Teller went back out to Einstein's house, got him to write the famous Einstein letter to FDR explaining the potential for a weapon if one could control a nuclear reaction. And that letter got to the president in the fall of 1939. And from there, the Manhattan Project began. Now, the Manhattan Project was happening at the same time the scientists were discovering how nuclear fission would work and what might be used for nuclear fission. Not only uranium, but plutonium, another heavy element, which had been discovered and produced by Glenn Seaborg at a lab in California at Berkeley. But he could only produce microgram quantities, not enough to be of any effect for energy production or a weapon. How would you produce enough plutonium for a weapon? The physicists said, well, you need a nuclear reactor. Now, nuclear reactors didn't exist, so they had to build one. And they built one at the University of Chicago, known as the Chicago Pile. The Chicago Pile was literally a stack, a pile of graphite blocks and uranium with some neutron-absorbing rods that, as they were removed, would allow the neutrons to circulate freely and collide with other nuclei of uranium and cause those to split, releasing other neutrons that would collide with other nuclei, a chain reaction. They theorized how this would work. It worked the way they expected. The reactor went critical, sustained a nuclear reaction. Not a bad thing. It's what they expected to happen. They let it run for less than 30 minutes and declared, we know how to control a nuclear reaction. It's kind of amazing because the science worked exactly the way they predicted. This was all mathematics, and it worked. 2 months later, on February 2nd of 1943, the X10 Graphite Reactor was constructed at Oak Ridge. It was a 24-foot cube of graphite with 1,248 holes in the front into which workers would slide uranium slugs clad in aluminum. And by putting enough uranium into the reactor in the right configuration, they could cause a nuclear reaction, a chain reaction, carefully controlled. But by irradiating the uranium and then pushing it out the back of the reactor into a deep pool of water, retrieving it, taking it next door to a chemical separation facility, they could extract plutonium. Enough plutonium to show that you could produce plutonium using a nuclear reactor and ultimately to build a weapon. 2 grams of plutonium were produced at the graphite reactor within about 2 months. And scientists and engineers used this knowledge to build the permanent large reactors, production reactors at Hanford, Washington, that produce plutonium for a nuclear weapon. Now, in Oak Ridge, there were 3 other facilities that were built focused on uranium. The Y-12 nuclear weapons plant enriched uranium, got fissionable uranium-235 out of naturally occurring uranium. Uranium-235 is only 0.7% of naturally occurring uranium, so you have to separate it out of the naturally occurring uranium. Y-12 used electromagnetic separation to do that. The K-25 plant used gaseous diffusion to do that, running the uranium through a series of filters until the smaller uranium-235 came through. And then the S-50 plant, which was near K-25, used thermal diffusion. But most of the uranium that was used in Little Boy, which was dropped on Hiroshima, came from the Y-12 nuclear weapons plant through that electromagnetic separation process. The plutonium that was used in Fat Man, which was the bomb dropped on Nagasaki, came from the Hanford Works in Washington State. And both of those weapons were ultimately put together and developed at the Los Alamos lab in New Mexico. So you had 3 sites in Oak Ridge, K25 with S50 there, Y12, and X10. They were built in Oak Ridge because the Manhattan Project didn't know which would get fissionable material first. The science was so new, the engineering was so new, that they had to build 3 different sites in this race to harness the atom. And nationally, there were 3 major sites for the Manhattan Project: Oak Ridge, Hanford, and Los Alamos. Hanford and Oak Ridge were production sites. Los Alamos was the scientific laboratory where they also tested the plutonium bombs before, to just show that those would work. It's amazing to me, looking at it, how this was all happening in real time. Scientists were debating whether it would work, how it would work, what kind of engineering and physics were needed to make it work, what the effect would actually be. And of course, there's the morality of it. Do we want to do this? Is this something that ought to be done? Should it be dropped as a demonstration? Should a bomb be dropped on the population? And these ethical debates were there from the very beginning. As for Oak Ridge and the X10 Graphite Reactor, no material produced at Oak Ridge ever went into a weapon from X10 in the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Oak Ridge National Laboratory has always been a research and demonstration site where we take the hardest and newest science in the world and try to understand how to make good use of it, what the ramifications might be. A last comment regarding the Manhattan Project is that it's important to recognize that the dawn of the atomic age and the creation of nuclear weapons didn't come about because scientists were trying to create a devastating weapon of war. Scientists were just trying to understand the periodic table. They were probing elements up to uranium to understand how the world worked. And when they got to uranium, they discovered nuclear fission. And they realized the ramifications of that. And it was the scientists with that knowledge who then had to try to make sure that it didn't fall into the wrong hands and that it was used for the right purposes. After the war, really even during the Manhattan Project, once the X10 reactor had accomplished its goal of showing how to produce plutonium, the scientists and engineers knew they had this incredible scientific instrument in the graphite reactor. How were they going to use it? One of the earliest uses was for the production of medical isotopes. The first official shipment of medical isotopes from the graphite reactor occurred less than a year after the end of World War II. And Eugene Wigner was the research director at the time. And they shipped carbon-14 to a hospital in St. Louis. And shipments have continued to this day. We still produce medical isotopes at our facilities today, the high-flux isotope reactor and the radiochemical engineering facility that is next door to the high-flux isotope reactor. So we've saved countless lives through nuclear medicine. We pioneered the use of nuclear power. About 20% of energy in the United States comes from nuclear power. It's the largest source of emissions-free energy. And we pioneered nuclear engineering and health physics in those early days. We built ultimately 13 reactors at Oak Ridge as we tried to discover which reactors would be the safest and most effective, generate power most effectively. And we trained a lot of the first nuclear engineers. We had the reactor. So if you wanted to understand nuclear engineering, you came where the reactor was. We trained those engineers and scientists until the university stood up their own programs. And one of those students who came to the X10 site, was Hyman Rickover with a group from the Navy. They wanted to figure out if you could use nuclear power for a submarine. And Rickover figured it out. He grilled our scientists. He would walk up to them and say, "I'm Captain Rickover. and I'm stupid. Explain to me what you do. He was not stupid. He was a driver, and he figured out how to put a safe nuclear reactor on a submarine and launched the Nautilus in 1954. Today, all of the Navy's submarines and aircraft carriers are nuclear powered. And the fuel for the nuclear Navy the source material for it comes from Y12 next door to the lab here. We also pioneered health physics, which is protecting people from radiation. We had one of the largest biology divisions in the world through the 50s and into the 60s. Leanne Russell and others used the mouse house to discover what radiation exposures were safe. The protections for pregnant women came out of that, and that biology, as science does, led into other discoveries, like the discovery that the Y chromosome is responsible for maleness. We discovered messenger RNA. A significant amount of genomic work came out of that. We supported the Human Genome Project. We do a lot with plant genomics now, trying to improve biofuels and mitigate climate change. Back to the earliest days of the graphite reactor, some of the scientists working there realized that you could use neutrons to probe materials, much as X-rays use light. And Ernest Wallen and Cliff Shull pioneered the field of neutron diffraction. When you penetrate materials and biological materials with neutrons, you can understand how the atoms move and how they behave in real time. Neutrons are really good at detecting light materials, while X-rays can detect heavy materials. And this has led to breakthroughs in medicine, in alloys and metals. We have done experiments like putting a running engine into a neutron beam to see how the components degrade over time. It's remarkable the work that our scientists do in that regard at today, the spallation neutron source and the high flux isotope reactor. So Oak Ridge is a leader in advanced materials, in neutron science, in nuclear science and engineering, in isotope production. And one of our leadership areas today, of course, is supercomputing. We have had the most powerful computer in the world several times, 3 times in recent years. And if you go back to the 50s when this started, we had most powerful then as well. And, you know, the most powerful computer in the world in 1995 is about equivalent to the iPhone that you carry in your pocket today. Computing technology has advanced incredibly quickly. What it allows us to do is to understand the data coming out of these major facilities like our neutron facilities. We right now have the most powerful computer in the United States. It was just overtaken after 2 years as #1 in the world, but we're building another one that we expect to come online in 2021. And we, of course, expect to be #1 again. We're also today, we just won a quantum science center to try to pioneer that next phase of materials research and information technology and cybersecurity. We do a lot of work securing the grid. We are helping manufacturers improve their processes and save energy. We 3D printed a car, a truck, a submersible, and are pushing the boundaries of what's possible with advanced manufacturing, which is a next phase of the advanced materials work that we've done for decades, inventing alloys that are lighter, stronger. If you can save energy as well as produce energy more efficiently, you solve a lot of the problems in the world. Think about that. Think about all of the improvements that you want to make anywhere in the world. You want people to have good jobs. You want people to have good health care. You want people to have opportunity. In America, we wake up every morning and we don't think for a second that when we hit the light switch, the light's not going to come on. We don't expect for a minute to go to the gas station and not be able to get gas, although some of us who remember the 70s maybe are more likely to think about that. Why can we live the way we do? It's because we know we have enough energy. We know the energy is going to work. If you live in a country or a city where you're not sure that the electrical grid is going to work today, what does that mean for your ability to sustain industrial production, to have hospitals with equipment that can save lives, to be able to innovate anything? You have to have clean, abundant energy for a growing global population. And Oak Ridge National Laboratory is right in the middle of producing more energy, using the energy we do produce more efficiently, and coming up with alternative forms and alternative ways to do that. And we let that science lead us into new areas across the research spectrum. It's an amazing place to work, and it started with the X10 Graphite Reactor. I'm glad that you're interested in this. If you want more information, go to ornl.gov. You can take virtual tours of some of our facilities on our interactive map. And we certainly hope to meet you someday at the laboratory when we're open again after this pandemic, where we're also contributing significant research using our supercomputers, using our biological expertise to try to find a cure and a way to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Thank you for your time and your interest.
There's a real science to making a good gift shop. We like to make sure you can take some science home. We also like that you can take the story of Oak Ridge back with you. Great books, local artisan crafts, and uniquely AMSE gifts are easy to find when you visit or go online through amse.org. Here are Gabby and Sherry to walk you through the shop in their own unique way.
Hi everyone, my name is Gabby.
Hi, I'm Sherry.
And welcome to our AMSE Discovery Shop.
We have all these things here that we have color changing pens, we have color changing pencils. All of these have AMSE on it. These are cool because they're color changing. You hold on to them, put them in the refrigerator, you take them out, they change a different color.
Don't forget the water bottles do the same thing.
They do.
So if you want to show your friends color changing, try with the water bottle as well.
Let them think they're going nuts. We have, as you walk in, we have some different kind of cool little animals. A deer for this time of the year, Pepe Le Pew.
And you can't forget all the science nerds out there. Sherry, I heart you so much.
Aww, food poison.
Animal cell, anyone?
Shingles, love it.
Hey Sherry, did you know this is one of our favorite cooking books that we have here on sale? Oh my gosh.
I love cookbooks, Gabby. I love them. Let me show you this. This is really neat. In this book, it gives you all the Oak Ridge housing from way back when, back in the Manhattan days. Yes, it has the picture of the house after it was completed, the blueprints, the square footage of it.
We found a lot of guests that actually ask for this particular kind of book because they are wanting to remember and reminisce and find their old house that they used to live in.
Look at this. Isn't that awesome?
Cool. Yes.
They are. This was actually made from somebody here in Oak Ridge.
Hey, check out these mugs. These are really, really nice.
I love those.
And we also have some great plasma balls that I really like, and these are actually very popular because you get to see all the plasma and you get to touch it. That's really, really cool.
That is cool. It matches our big one we actually have in the museum.
We also have these cool things, Sherry, for any kind of science experiment or any kind of puzzles you want to do at the family house. Hey, let's check this.
Show me your favorite, because I'm going to...
Oh gosh, not again, Sherry.
Yeah, I know. Here's all of our beautiful, colorful shirts that we have. These are all kids' shirts. Those are adult shirts. We have Manhattan Project hats, AMSE hats, and this right here is actually a glow-in-the-dark shirt. It is amazing. You just wait till you get in a dark room at night. They'll see you. So Mom and Dad wants to find you, there you are.
A big rage right now is slime. That is a big thing. Oh my gosh, my younger siblings are going to have a field day when they go see slime. And check this one out. This one's magnetic putty because of how strong this magnet is.
Oh my goodness.
That is so much fun.
This is my favorite thing in the whole wide world to do. I love playing board games. This is my favorite. Board or card, either one I'm happy with. Sparkle's awesome.
Yes.
These right here, I love every single one of these. These are amazing to play. I have actually played them.
Tell me what's your favorite though.
I like this one right here, 5 crowns, because I love cards, and that's what it is, and I love it. Have you had this ice cream?
I have had that from a long time ago.
It's amazing.
So they had cookies and cream?
I did not.
They only had Neapolitan when I was a kid, so when they came with cookies and cream, I have to definitely try this. This is going to be very, very good.
I do love crafts. Look at all the cool craft things we have. Look at this tile art.
And this is pretty cool because it actually is STEAM, so it's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics for all kinds of students, so that's amazing.
Love this one. Love anything that has to do with crafts, art. I'm all over it.
The that I did was a tin can robot, and this one was our very first Family Science Day, Family Science Saturday, and this one's pretty cool because you get to build it, and they're all little tiny pieces, but you get to put in a great project together, and at the end you get a great toy, and this is one of my favorites.
Well, Gabby, thanks for taking the time to go through the gift shop with me today.
Thank you for coming with me. That was a lot of fun.
It was. I really enjoyed this.
Me too.
Well, folks, visit us online at our gift shop, amse.org, and we see you soon.
See you soon.
Museums across the world undertake outreach education. We take a theme that we feature, develop curricula to educate school children, civic groups, and so forth. The possibilities really are endless. For AMSE, we have a dynamic group of educators and classes that surpass even the greatest educational standards with our support material, online content, and integrated digital classrooms for virtual outreach. I recently spoke to some of our colleagues at Oak Ridge National Lab about AMSE's educational partnerships. As part of AMSE's mission, we help shine a light on the incredible story of Oak Ridge National Lab. Through our exhibits, our public programs, our educational initiatives, we tell the story of all the work that's been done at Oak Ridge over the years and the incredible work going on there right now that's changing the world for the better. We're really happy to be joined today by Wade Creswell, who's Community Engagement Manager, and Allison Melton, Public Education and Outreach Specialist, both from Oak Ridge National Lab. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Now, Allison, I'm going to start with you with an admittedly unfair and very broad question. I know you do a lot of outreach in terms of STEM, of teaching STEM. Why is the teaching of STEM so very important?
As the country's largest Department of Energy research lab, we feel a need to connect our scientists who are researching all kinds of amazing topics with our local schools and with students and teachers in the area.
Now, Allison, I know we've worked together in the past in many ways, AMSE and the lab, on educational initiatives. We've worked together on our summer camp. I know that certainly Oak Ridge National Lab has provided experts to us to help us as we think about how do we make our exhibits even better. My understanding is that groups visiting the labs, school groups, have often started or stopped at AMSE to help them better understand the complex science at the lab. Of course, we work together with the Department of Energy on the public bus tours. What do you think, how can we move this relationship, this partnership forward in the future in terms of how we both reach the community in terms of STEM teaching?
So there's a lot of natural overlap between the research that occurs at the lab and the exhibits that you have at AMSE. So there's a lot of space for natural overlap between the two. And it really works well for students to, when they see things at the lab or hear from researchers at the lab, then to see exhibits that correlate with what they learned about at the lab at AMSE and have a way that they can actually interact with those things in a more hands-on way.
And I will say one thing, everyone in the lab has been so helpful as we try to, for all the public, especially for students, as they go through the exhibit here to better understand some of that science, some of that engineering. We're working on the QR codes that are being attached to different parts of the exhibit, and you all have helped us connect with so many great experts at ORNL so that when you go to that part of the exhibit, they can come up, if you bring it up in your phone, and say, here's a bit more about the spatial neutron source or those types of things that can be somewhat daunting, but thanks to having all this amazing brain power right down the road, we can explain it to our guests better. So thank you all for that. Now, I know Wade, as Community Relations Manager, you have a heck of a job of talking to the community about what the lab does. And there's so much going on there. How do you get your arms around that? What are the main messages you take out to the community here and broader about what the lab is accomplishing?
That is a big and loaded question, Alan.
I specialize in those ways.
Yeah, because so much research is happening. I mean, as Allison mentioned before, Oak Ridge National Lab is the largest science and energy lab throughout the National Laboratory Complex across the country. So there's so many areas that ORNL focuses on. So making sure that we are a voice for the lab in the community to help them understand all the different research areas that we have. We now have 8 science research directorates that are focusing on many different ways that we are advancing the world of science. So being a voice through, particularly and primarily through K through 12 STEM outreach is our #1 way to reach out. And then just building relationships with organizations like AMSE that can best help communicate that to a public audience. You know, those are ways that our office is responsible for helping carry out that message, out that mission.
I know I've said this to you both before. We definitely are honored to be part of helping get that message out, and look forward to continue working with you on that in the future. What's the most amazing thing you've learned about the lab?
The most amazing thing I've learned at the lab goes back to 1943. And that is no slight at the incredible work going on today. Yeah. But the scale and the size and the scope of the Manhattan Project, and the role that Oak Ridge in general played in that is unmatched by anything I've ever heard of in my life. Yeah. And we're still standing on the shoulders of the giants that led that effort. All of the research that we're doing today might not be possible had it not been for those men and women during World War II. Yeah, that's very well said.
What about you, Allison?
So to answer your question about how long we've been there, we've both been there for about 2 years. Okay. A little bit over 2 years. And I learned something new every time I go to a facility, a different facility at the lab. And even though I've been to all the facilities several times, every time I go, I learn something new. It's amazing to me just how much it changes and how many new developments are coming out on a regular basis. The MDF in particular, every time I go there, they've got a new contraption creating amazing things, and just to hear the things that are created there, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, I'm amazed each and every day too. So let me bring you back to AMSE here in closing. In the AMSE exhibit, what could you list as your perhaps favorite part of that exhibit?
That's a tough one, because AMSE does such a great job. Why AMSE is so important to the lab is it tells a story on an ongoing basis that we don't get a chance to engage in very often. Yeah. We get to tell bits and pieces of the story, both past and present, to specific audiences. But telling the whole story or having a way to engage in everything that we're doing is pretty difficult for us to do. So that, to me, that's the mutual benefit that AMSE and the lab have for each other. Yeah. I'm not sure if that answers the question or not.
No, that's great. What about you, Allison?
I'm actually because once you said that made me think. I really love the way it's even just laid out, that you can start in the past. You can go and start out in the 40s, and you can walk through and you can see everything that's happened at the lab and is happening in the lab through this day. And it really does tell a really great story just walking through there.
Very good.
It's really neat. And I love that you can actually go and experience those things. You can actually touch the things that we're actually building at the lab and doing at the lab, and you can actually experience them in that way.
Yeah. I love the interactivity of the exhibit. Of course, I love every part of it, but the interactivity, I think, is terrific, and we're adding even more, seems like each and every day. So I want to thank you all for what you do, for the incredible work you do in education and outreach and telling the world about the lab, and for your partnership with AMSE. We treasure it, and we appreciate you being part of AMSE Day.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate you having
us.
We love going into classrooms and sharing science. Now, to explain more about what we do, I'd like to introduce Linnell Wright.
Hello, I'm Linnell Wright, an educator with the American Museum of Science and Energy, and I wanted to talk to you a little about the AMSE Outreach Program. Outreach has been a part of AMSE since the museum opened in 1949. Educators originally traveled across the nation presenting programs on the new and exciting applications of atomic age. AMSE's current outreach program travels to surrounding regional, rural, and inner-city school systems to provide exciting and fun hands-on STEM experiences for over 1,000 students annually. Our programs are designed to help teachers meet the Tennessee Department of Education state standards while engaging students in an experience that gives them real-life applications and understanding in areas with science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. Our vision is to increase the number of youth pursuing STEM careers and to strive to educate students about what's happening in STEM fields right now, and to illustrate that science is for everyone. When our outreach educators step into the classroom, they're excited to present and get students moving and experimenting, problem solving, and creating. AMSE offers over 10 classroom lessons that teach STEAM concepts through hands-on activities and guided explorations. To students, something as simple as building a circuit and testing conductors and insulators, or exploring the forces of motion, light, sound, and mixing chemicals to create exothermic or endothermic reactions, all are a gateway to understanding how STEAM relates to their everyday lives. Over the past decade, there has been an explosion of scientific and technological discoveries that have significantly impacted our state and nation. Programs like Outreach help us to reinforce and ensure that our students are equipped to comprehend and apply STEAM knowledge into their future careers. By showing kids that science can be fun, AMSE hopes to inspire lifelong learners and science enthusiasts. AMSE Outreach believes that great scientists of tomorrow are sitting in front of us experimenting in classrooms today. We will continue to move forward with special business partnerships that support outreach in our community, like CNS, and others that would like to ensure that we continue to make STEAM fun and available for everyone. If you would like to schedule or learn more about the AMSE's outreach program for your class, just check out our website at www.amse.org in the Education section, or email us at amseoutreacheducation@gmail.com.
I'm Corky Witt at the American Museum of Science and Energy, and we're going to be meeting Mr. Stuffy today and learn about our insides, about anatomy and physiology. This blue tuft of hair will give us a hint of what Mr. Stuffy may look like, but let's look at him a little more carefully. Meet Mr. Stuffy. Why did we give him blue hair rather than red hair or black hair or blonde hair? Well, it's to show us that we're all a little different on the outside, but we're all the same on the inside. Let's learn more about our internal organs. Mr. Stuffy's heart is right here, and let's check that out. His heart is actually beating. That helps pump our blood through our body. He also has a heart patch on his wrist, and that's showing that he doesn't have a heart in his wrist, but he also has a pulse there. So if you take your pointer finger, your index finger, and find the little groove right in your wrist and touch that, you can feel your pulse. It's not your heart there, but it's the blood going through one of your vessels. And with your other finger, go to the back of your ear, and there's another vessel there, an artery. You can feel the pulse there too. So you can actually feel your heartbeat and count when you're exercising how many beats per minute. When you're resting, it's slower, faster, pumping the blood through your body. Let's see what else is in Mr. Stuffy's insides. What do we have here? This is Mr. Stuffy's heart. Your heart is about the size of your fist. If you put it right up the middle of your chest, that vessel pumps the blood through your body, carrying the food and oxygen that your cells need to live. Let's see what else is in Mr. Stuffy. What is this? Oh my goodness. He has two of these huge pink things. What do you think these are? These are our lungs that when we breathe, the oxygen goes into the lungs, and it goes through this structure. This is our windpipe, or the trachea, situated right here from our nose and mouth down to our lungs, and our lungs sit up in our chest. This lung has two parts. Let me open it up and show you. These red, white, and blue structures, let's talk about them. The red, as you know from what we talked about with the heart, carries the oxygenated blood, and the blue carries the deoxygenated blood that's carrying carbon dioxide. The little white circles are the air sacs called the alveoli, and that is where the diffusion from the oxygen is transferred into the bloodstream. This one has 3 parts, so each of your lungs is a little bit different. You have one that's 3-lobed and one is 2-lobed. So this is the system where we get oxygen into our body, picked up by the blood to carry throughout our system. Let's see what else is in Mr. Stuffy. All right, I'm gonna put this in the position where it would sit in your body. And this long tube is the food tube, and the word, when you swallow something, it goes down this tube and it's called the esophagus. It's kind of a big word. When we chew food, the saliva in our mouth begins the digestion, but when it goes into the stomach, there are other digestive juices that break down the proteins and the sugars and make sort of a solution of it before it goes into our intestinal tract. What do we have here? What do you think this is? This is the liver. It sits right on top of our stomach. Let's zip it open and see what's inside. Green, This is something called bile. There's a gallbladder nestled in the liver that helps us digest fats. And the pancreas is really important in making some chemicals called hormones that help us regulate sugar. These are the kidneys, and I can't resist doing this. Kidneys sit in the back of our body cavity, and they are the filters. Blood goes through the kidneys, shown by the red and the blue vessels, filters out the waste materials from the blood that the cells have produced. And it goes into our bladder, and that's what we void when we go to the bathroom, when we urinate. Okay, what's left? What is this? It keeps coming out, and coming out, and coming out. 19.5 feet of intestine. That's incredible. A lot of people think the intestinal tract is the sewer pipe. Not at all. There are lots of blood vessels that are connected to the intestines, and this is where we're absorbing the nutrients from the food we eat, the proteins, the carbohydrates, the lipids. This is where we absorb the good stuff. It goes through our circulatory system, through our cells, and nourishes our little factories, the cells in our body that give us energy that we need to run, play, and think. Just when you thought there was nothing left inside, there is still more. Let's see. Oh, what is this? We have 2 intestines, the large intestine and the small intestine. And which do you think is the small intestine? Is it the short one or the long one? Well, if your guess was the long one, you are correct. That's the one that comes right out from the stomach, and it is not how long it is, it's the diameter, how far around it is. So the small intestine is smaller around, the large intestine is shorter, but it's longer around. So what happens in the small intestine is the nutrients are absorbed into our bloodstream. What happens in the large intestine is water is absorbed. So this being a science class, we can talk about anything. I think we all know what diarrhea is, all right? Diarrhea is when everything kind of zooms through and you have a lot of liquid, very liquid stool coming out of you. That's because bacteria is affecting your intestine and everything is rushing through. And once you take, a lot of times when you are not feeling well, your moms and dads maybe give you soft drinks or popsicles, kind of keep you hydrated because you don't want to be dehydrated, because when you're losing all that liquid, you just don't feel good. And so when things have settled down and you're feeling better, you may drink some kind of, or be given some kind of medicine. Everything slows down and the water is absorbed, and your fecal material, your stool, is solid again. So diarrhea is really harmful to when you're losing so much of your fluid. You got to stay hydrated, because believe it or not, we are 70% water. You're saying, I'm solid as a rock. I'm not that squishy sponge, but by volume, you're over 70% water. A lot of us don't realize this. We just unpacked Mr. Stuffy. Now let's stuff him back. So we've stuffed Mr. Stuffy, put him all back together. We're going to zip him up in his enclosure and encourage you to come visit us at the American Museum of Science and Energy and visit Mr. Stuffy.
The maintenance of collections is a monumental task for a 70-plus-year-old institution. Recently, Quinn worked with the DOE classification folks to bring you a peek into the AMSE Vault.
This is an interior climate-controlled safe room in building number 2417. In 70 years of operation, the American Museum of Science and Energy has collected quite a number of artifacts, of which only a few are currently displayed. Set on top of dozens of sliding shelves are boring gray boxes. Hundreds of them. Okay, just dozens. And they're not boring. Still, as you'll see, sometimes the small boxes yield the biggest treasures. This may look like a sea of gray boxes, but we actually have a database of all of the artifacts that are in these boxes. And today we have permission to be here. It's a pretty special day. We have Dirk, our classified analyst, with us, who will tell us what we can and can't show. And what I'm hoping to find in here, just kind of randomly, is some really interesting artifacts today. Let's have a look. I had visited this space once before and gave the classification folks a lot to sort through so that we could get this sneak peek into some of the AMSE archives and collections. Believe it or not, there are still items and images in these boxes that are still deemed sensitive. Now this is really cool. This is a game that was made right here in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It's the game of atoms made by engineers from here. So we're going to take all of these over to another room that our classification analyst says that we can use to unbox all of this. Let's go. Up and at 'em. This is the one that I'm very excited about. This is the Up and at 'em game, which was developed by two chemical engineers who worked on the Manhattan Project, and they started this immediately after the war was over. Now it says learn to play in 15 minutes. I have read the instructions for this game, and I'm not sure I could learn to play this game in about a year. This game is clearly developed by engineers, chemists, and other scientists, and they think in a way that we mortals just don't. This game is so cool. It's such a shame that it's really not in better condition. We're going to stabilize it, take care of it, conserve it, and put it back on the shelves. Now, these two boxes were on the same shelf. I really not sure what we're going to look at here, because they do not have records. So we're going to see what's in here, and wow, looks like this was probably a gift to the museum of some model airplanes from World War II. There's some really interesting designs down here. Let's see if we can't dig through this for one moment. Ah yes, this one's very cool. Let's see what's in this other box. I'm really hoping it's something to do with the nuclear navy, since we have that new exhibit going up. And it's more planes. Now here we definitely have some larger planes, like this British bomber, I believe, and then this enormous Liberator. We can use this for research projects. Sometimes we just find cool stuff that people have made. Recently we even got a children's book that was written during the Manhattan Project. The director wanted to stump me with these boots, but I found them fascinating because they were made in a place I lived for some time, Melbourne, Australia. I've seen the descendants of these woolly war effort providers. When I first saw these, I was instantly transported to those hillsides and the sight of those sheep. The albums of these pictures really bring to life what the museum used to be like, before even the museum was what most people remember from when they were children. This is the original museum. This is what was conceived of by people who had actually lived here during the Manhattan Project, so that they could teach their children about what they went through and what the future would hold for everybody. Okay, this one is pretty heavy. I have a vague idea of what we might expect in this one, which is a lot of things. So let's take out some of this padding. And then we'll pull them out and see what we have. Ooh, an excellent selection. So this is the Army and Navy, I believe, Excellence in Production Award. That was given to factories that did a great job during the war. History is real-life time travel. These boxes are treasure troves of personal artifacts. Some of these things were carried in some way for years and into top-secret discussions. These are the commonplace items of a people involved in the world's greatest technological industrialization. Ancient AMSE swag is always cool. Well, this was a real treat today. This is one of the few times that DOE has let us bring cameras into this facility, and we found some real treasures. Looking forward to doing that again. Until then, we really appreciate you joining us, and I've got to get back to work.
I hope you all are enjoying AMSE Day. As I'm sure you can see, the staff and the foundation all share a real passion for our mission and for this community. Please consider giving today to the AMSE Foundation. You can do that by calling 865-294-4531 or going online to amse.org, and there you'll see how to donate. If you wish, you can also mail your donations by check to 115 Main Street East, Oak Ridge, Tennessee 37830. That's 115 Main Street East, Oak Ridge, Tennessee 37830. With your support, we can continue presenting wonderful interactive exhibits. We can continue with our innovative in-person and online educational initiatives. We can continue to reach out to this community and far beyond through our programming. Now, more than ever, we need all of you to be part of the AMSE family, to remember how this museum has contributed to Oak Ridge and East Tennessee for over 70 years, and to help us make sure we can continue to fulfill our important mission. We serve not just as an educational and cultural resource, which of course we are, but as an economic one. Visitors coming here from around the globe spend their money at our restaurants and hotels and other venues and stores in Oak Ridge and Knoxville, in Clinton and Oliver Springs and Farragut, Kingston, Wartburg, and so on. We need your help to continue and to do even more for our communities. You can support us today by calling 865-294-4531. You can mail donations to 115 Main Street East, Oak Ridge, Tennessee 37830, or you can go online to amse.org, amse.org, and there you'll see how you can donate or purchase memberships. Thank you so much, and now back to our AMSE Day programming.
Welcome to the American Museum of Science and Energy. I'm Corky Witt, and we're going to be demonstrating the Van de Graaff generator today, which is our signature machine that everybody remembers having their hair stood up, whether they're a student or an adult. So this is the Van de Graaff. It's a model of a much larger piece of equipment that scientists use to study the structure of matter. The way it works is inside this dome, there is a rubberized belt that goes around between two rollers. It zooms around and rubs charges off the dome, just like you walking across, going up to a doorknob and getting a static shock. Well, let's move over to the model of the atom. You know that the center of the atom has protons, the positively charged structures, and then the neutral charged neutrons. But spinning around the outside very rapidly are the negatively charged electrons. Whether you're, as I said, walking across carpeting, combing your hair, or going down the slide at McDonald's, what you're doing is you're rubbing those electrons off, so the next thing you touch, the person, a doorknob, wherever, you get those electrons back. That's what the static discharge is. So let me snag our charges, and let's go back to the Van de Graaff and understand how it works. The Van de Graaff at the lab, or the Charged Particle Accelerator called the Holyfield Radioactive Particle Accelerator, is 3 stories tall, and as the belt goes around, this rubberized belt, it rubs the negative charges off, building up a slight positive charge. Well, if we have a volunteer come up and stand on our platform, it'll demonstrate how it'll affect that person's hair, which is really exciting. So touch this dome, I'm going to turn the machine on, and as the electrons are rubbed off, she is going to become very positive. She's standing on a rubberized mat so that she's not pulling more electrons back, and let's see what's going to happen to her hair. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, here we go. As As the belt zooms around, the electrons are rubbed off the dome as well as off our volunteer, and as her hair becomes more and more positive and positive repels, giving her this great looking repulsive hairdo. How does it feel? Can you feel me giving you
Feels
electrons?
kind of fuzzy, kind of
Can you feel my
tickly-like.
electrons giving electrons back? Can you feel the mirror?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, this is going to be something that our volunteer may not want to do. Go ahead and put your fist toward me. There. I think we're going to destroy her diamond. There, you can see that spark. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. All right, that's a great look. Now, as our volunteer takes her hand off and steps down, her hair she'll pull the electrons back and her hair will fall down immediately, we hope. All right, let's give her a big round of applause. Another application is using this fluorescent tube. There are atoms in the gas in the electric tube, and as those electrons are attracted to the positive dome more and more and more, it lights up. Kind of my Darth Vader lightsaber. May the Force be with you. What we're seeing here is a miniature lightning bolt. And what you're hearing is the air expanding very quickly, and that's like thunder. So lightning and thunder happen at the same instant. It's just the light gets to our eyes quicker than the sound gets to our ears. And our Van de Graaff generator helps us understand the structure of atoms with this particle accelerator. I think it's working. Yeah. Yeah. Mine's.
You look like a puppet. I was gonna say you look like kids shaking off water.
Does that a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, it's working.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Here.
Woo! That's a good one.
Look at that.
That's great.
Oh,
yeah.
All right. It's not dead.
It's not dead. It lives.
It's not shocking you.
Oh no. There we go. Hey, do that again. Yeah, look.
I'm getting shocked in the
Minis.
Have you done this?
Oh, please. Yeah, the face.
Oh,
Matt?
I need a good haircut.
That's exciting.
What's up, Matt?
Great. Stand up there.
Oh, you shocked.
Touch it real quick. Shake, shake, shake.
Shake it. Shake, shake, shake.
I put stuff in my hair. I put stuff.
There you go. Oh, we need to see your beard.
You need the beard?
I don't think the beard's
I don't know if the beard's going to do anything.
wiry.
Yeah, I don't think the beard's going to do much.
That's a good one.
That's good. All right.
My kids, though, are great.
You may have become a
see
star.
yours.
Okay, now, Matt, we are going to actually try this.
We're videoing everything.
Not actually going to try.
Shake, shake, shake. Now do
Burn the
that.
jello.
There you go.
Oh my
God.
gosh,
Now
we
let's
got a
see.
winner.
Let's see what happens. Oh, it does shy away from the
You'll
scissors.
shock
Look
him
at
in the-
that.
You'll shock him in the face.
I've been shocked before. Oh my gosh.
Not a good idea to shock him in the face.
Well, no, we were talking about
Here. Put your fist with it.
Ooh, good shot.
Do that one more time.
It doesn't go to the ring though, it just goes to the skin. Or maybe it goes to the ring.
No, it's definitely not great.
Alright, Kathleen, you're next.
All right,
Did you wash your hands?
It's working. No. It's working. It's working.
Matt, if you are joking,
Floaty. The metal's coming out of your head.
It is supermodel. There you go. Is it going up at all? Get a little bit more supermodel. It just takes a little bit longer. There it goes.
Yeah, it's trying. Your hair's probably heavy.
You've got thick hair.
That's gone.
Here, hold on.
I think that's legitimate.
That's legitimate.
No, I mean,
I'm legit.
You have 100 people in here. There it goes. There, fine.
There you go.
Just takes a while to get it charged. There, we just did it. We don't have to do it on Monday.
We have wonderful volunteers at AMSE. We can't do what we do without them. The majority of our volunteers worked at the facilities we feature. We have volunteers that can walk past NASA artifacts and tell you everything about them because they were responsible for manufacturing the Moonbox, designing RTGs for deep space travel, non-destructive neutron research, isotope research, and so much more. Our volunteers are the heart and soul of this museum. We want to share a few of their thoughts and what this place means to them.
Well, Oak Ridge was born by the Manhattan Project, and so this is a living history of Oak Ridge and what Oak Ridge did then and what Oak Ridge is doing today.
What was it like to live here in Oak Ridge? What did you do? Well, we did like everybody else, but it was still within this very secret environment. To convey that story of what it was like to live here, not only just the technical side of what we did here.
And showing people some of these sites where such important work was done, conditions that were highly secretive.
And I don't think you can find anybody better anywhere to do what they do, to tell the story of Oak Ridge, the past and the present. All of them have unique ideals and unique experiences within the plants and Oak Ridge where they've lived and breathed. And they share that and bring you down that path with them when they're telling the story.
Now, we have people here as volunteers who worked as scientists and engineers, but we also have people who worked here who really didn't have that much background about Oak Ridge until they moved here.
The volunteer role, if it works, is to engage with them. And engage with them however that volunteer is comfortable engaging with them. There's no one way for a volunteer to do it.
They're really ready to share that with everybody else, and the enthusiasm that they bring with it is just unbelievable.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll ask a question and it'll lead to a conversation, usually on a more private scale rather than a group scale. And you can tell they're really getting into wanting to learn more.
We have adults come in, some who barely remember their high school chemistry, and as I said, we have others that are trained with advanced degrees in science and engineering and so forth. So we have a whole spectrum, and as a volunteer we need to be able to communicate with each of those people and on their level.
And I think volunteers, particularly those who've got family connections or have heard enough stories from friends and neighbors and family that they can relate these stories, particularly to the young people. That's one of the values, I think, that where volunteers can really bring history alive. Well, I think the museum does a good job of picking up the origins in the Manhattan Project, not exclusively dwelling on them, but using them to set the stage to tell the story of Oak Ridge into the present.
It's a picture today of what has gone on in the past by so many people, so many different backgrounds, for so many different reasons.
And you can't find that information in a textbook. I mean, in a small textbook, but you can come here and in 2 hours you can walk through this museum and understand what happened in the 1940s and what's happening today. One fellow once said, "Can't you just say, and then they did isotopes?" Well, they do isotopes. They do important isotopes. Plutonium-238 is an isotope we use neutrons today to produce, not for weapons, that's 239, but to power spacecraft. Anything that goes past Mars depends on plutonium-238, made at Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
We have a very deep role here in NASA and the future of NASA as far as producing the fuel for satellites. And of course our NASA background goes all the way back to the very beginning.
We want to get out as much science and history as possible. We want to get people really interested.
And you can see that happen sometime in people's faces. as they realize, oh, this is what happened, or they came together and did this, and all these amazing scientists cooperated and worked on this project, and look what the results were, and look how many lives were saved. It's awesome.
When either children or grandchildren of the people who worked in Oak Ridge during the war come in, and they have a question that they've just been dying to ask somebody for years. They said, my daddy worked, I think, at a place called Y12, and there's something we don't understand. Here's our question. All of his pay stubs were written by the Kodak company. How could that be? And I said, oh, that's real simple. Really? I said, the Y12 plant during the war was operated and managed by Eastman Kodak out of Kingsport, Tennessee. And so all their checks were run through the Kodak, clearinghouse or the payroll system. It just lit them up. The woman, I remember, I think it was her daddy, and she just, oh my goodness, we didn't know that.
But you go from the Manhattan Project display here, where it's a wartime facility producing plutonium using this new thing called a pile, what we would now call a reactor, to generate neutrons to produce a plutonium isotope. But those same neutrons are useful for research. And so you go over there, and there's a letter on the wall dated May 1944, may we please start using those neutrons for research, and in particular demonstrating neutron scattering. And it segues into the displays that we have on the high flux isotope reactor and the spallation neutron source as we continue to do research with neutrons today.
I think Oak Ridge was always about trying to look out into the future, and I think the museums and bus tours and all that do the same thing now. We're looking to the future. We're looking to better it, to make it a better place for everyone. And we have the scientists and things here in Oak Ridge. It's unbelievable, some of the things that they do at these plants. And there's just so much, to share and tell, and that's one of the things we like to do here and on the bus tours.
If there's a way that we can share that information, if you can push the right buttons and find us at the right time, I think that's something that the volunteers can bring to a museum, any museum in fact.
They loved what they did, they believed in what they did, and they believed in what Oak Ridge as a whole did to help in the war. And they're proud of it, and they want to share that experience and how hard it was, what they had to go through to do it, the difficulties they faced, and the idea that they kept all this secret is almost something that you can't believe. And we're still right out there on the cutting edge with everybody else here in Oak Ridge.
Enable them to walk away here with a much more informed role of what happened here over all these years.
This is probably the most enjoyable job I've ever had. These are not just volunteers, they're lifelong friends that I didn't have the opportunity to know before. But I have fell in love with each and every one of them. They all have something to offer greatly to Oak Ridge and the museums and the bus tours.
It's so good to see school groups come through here, and the history that they learn is so important. I think it's very valuable to this community.
So whatever people are interested in, whether it's the Manhattan Project, whether it's defense, whether it's remediation, or what I really enjoy, whether it's the science of Oak Ridge National Laboratory, are all displayed here.
Exhibits by our state-of-the-art. And I think that just about anybody can find something in here to interest them or to tweak their imagination or to get them to tell other people to come and visit the museum.
And then they look in and they see all this stuff and they go, whoa! When we have the school groups go out, you know, I like to stand at the door and wave at all of them as they pass out. Did you have fun? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Particularly when they get over here starting to play with the energy systems, and you know, they start slow and then they get fired up.
And then we can tell them some of the things perhaps that the general public doesn't know, or that you wouldn't get in a school setting.
This museum is state of the art. And so they kind of come away, I think, with I think you blow them away in here.
But we still have a lot of volunteers that lived all of this history, worked these plants and knew everything that was going on and the secrecy of everything. It's amazing some of the stories that they can tell that you couldn't believe it unless you heard it from them, and they're ones that lived it. Their main goal is to see somebody really enjoy what they always enjoyed, and they impart that, you know, to our visitors and to our bus tours, and we're more than blessed to have these kind of volunteers. They're just the heart of the museum and the bus tours as far as I'm concerned.
This is how kids learn about states of matter at AMSE, with solids, liquids, and gas. Examples of a solid are this rubber ball, a wooden block, a sponge, and a piece of plastic. I asked the question, is this a solid? Can you see it? Can you feel it? Can you look through it? Well, you can't look through this, but you can look through this. So they have to collect data by examining these different states of matter. What about water? Water is unique in that it takes on the shape of its container, and we go through and ask the questions about, can you see it, can you see through it, so on and so forth. And then the last is a gas. By making sort of a homemade balloon, blowing gas into a Ziploc bag, we go ahead and ask our questions again. Can you see it? Can you see through it? Can you change its shape? So in this way, students learn about the different states of matter. You know, to blow up a balloon, it really takes a lot of energy. So we're going to use science to do that. We've put some baking soda in this balloon. We're going to take the balloon off the funnel, put it on this jar, which has a little bit of vinegar in it. And I'm going to pick up the balloon and let the baking soda go into the balloon. And what's happening? We're making a gas. We've mixed solid and a liquid, and we've made gas. So we've used science to blow up this balloon. It's going to blow. It's going to blow. Our next activity is the kids' favorite. We're going to use baking soda, unflavored gelatin, and alum, which is used to make pickles. Those are our powders, our solids. And then we're going to put those solids into vinegar. I put a little food coloring in with the vinegar. Okay, the count of 3, we're going to dump it all in and stir 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Whoa! We've mixed the solids and the liquid, and what have we made? What is a gas trapped in a liquid? There's a special name for it. Can you think of it? It's foam. So the kids always love this. I always encourage them to do a 1-finger touch. Tell me how it feels. They say cool, squishy. I always try to encourage them to say, what is it called? Gas trapped in a liquid? Foam. Like a sponge is a gas trapped in a solid. Cake, bread is a gas trapped in a solid as well. So we're more familiar with foam than we realize, but it's a new form, not a solid liquid gas. It's a combination of those. This is one of the ways that kids learn about solid, liquid, and gas, states of matter at AMSE.
Krista Brelsford is a researcher at ORNL. She's been tracking COVID statistics for some time, and we thought it was a great opportunity to showcase how Oak Ridge National Lab continues to stay at the forefront of the country's needs by using the brightest brains, best practices, and the latest technology available.
Hi, I'm Krista Brelsford. I'm proud to be an American, and I can't think of a better way to spend my career than trying to address the biggest risks our country faces. In normal times, that's been climate change. These aren't normal times. COVID-19 has upended our nation. It's an enormous threat to our health, economy, and national security. We all know this. That's why we're virtual right now. But have you noticed that we're all part of the largest coordinated effort in the history of humanity? Since March, billions of people worldwide have upended their lives in order to fight this virus with the only tool we've got: distance. You're part of it. Every place you don't go and hand you don't shake is part of the largest mobilization of human effort towards a single goal that the world has ever seen. Isn't that an incredible thing to be part of? My scientific career is built around understanding how we collectively influence our environment and how the built and natural environment shapes our collective choices. So to me, the magnitude of this coordinated effort is both inspiring and fascinating. Since March, much of my time has been focused on our collective response to COVID-19. Until we get better treatments and a vaccine, the mitigation strategies we have available to keep Americans safe are all about how people interact with each other and with their environment. So, I'm tracking collective behavior in near real time. I tracked announcements as schools closed. I tracked safer at home orders as they began to appear in cities and states through mid-March and early April. I watched our scientific understanding of the role of and efficacy of masks evolve in real time, and state and city level policy followed suit. This is an incredible correspondence between new knowledge and actual policy implementation. I watched whole new industries of information crop up as we learned what we needed to measure in order to understand how reopening is going. Most of these data providers are purchasing mobility information from apps loaded onto smartphones and other devices, and then aggregating them into a high-resolution picture of where Americans are going. For the first time, they're now making summaries of these data available for research. These trackers enable a faster and a more effective scientific response to the ongoing pandemic, and they also enable an entirely new empirical perspective on human behavior patterns. The behavior changes we see have been unprecedented, the largest coordinated effort in human history. So we're left with a question. When the crisis passes, what will our cities look like? What if these changes are transient, and which will stick around? To start to get at these questions, let's think about how we understand interactions between the decisions we make and other things we care about. One way of thinking about how to study and understand collective social processes is looking at the role that context has on shaping aggregate behavior patterns and the influence those behaviors have on the outcomes we care about. These start to become empirical questions that we can answer with data that we actually have. Some examples of context are the policies I tracked. Behaviorally, are we staying home? What kinds of leisure activities do we engage in? For consequences, how fast is COVID spreading? For a very long time, we've been limited to looking just at the relationship between context and consequences because, for the most part, we haven't had any measurement of behavior. But of course, for all its challenges, COVID-19 has brought about a new era in the open measurement of human behavior. Here, we've got typical travel behavior for each U.S. county by day, starting in early March. Darker green is more travel, lighter green is less travel. We can see early on mobility clicking around about normal, and then on March 12th, every national sports league in this country closed down. And over the next 2 weeks, mobility fell to just 10% of normal levels. That is an amazing behavior change. You can see it started in the Northeast and spread across the entire country very quickly. Mobility remained quite low through the end of March into mid-April. Starting in mid-April, we started to see the safer at home policies almost entirely in effect. And at the same time, mobility started to begin to very slowly and cautiously recover. Started in the South and then spread to other parts of the country later on. The policies started to fade in May and June, and by June, typical mobility was about half of the pre-pandemic normal. Now, there were big differences in how urban and rural places responded. This isn't wholly surprising, as early outbreaks were also centered in cities. Then, in addition to just looking at overall movement, we can also look at where people actually went. This figure shows an index of how unusual behavior about going places has been. The left panel shows visits to bars, and the right panel shows visits to schools. In both places, darker red shows very unusual drops in visits, and darker blue shows very unusual increases. The first panel, what you see here, covers New Year's Eve over 2019, and so bar visits are up and school visits are down. The kids are on winter break. Now, we can watch the weeks click by in early 2020. Look for schools in New Orleans, and in the first week in March, we see Mardi Gras, then Texas's spring break, and then COVID arrives. We see the most dramatic lockdown period in both schools and bars through March and April. And then by the beginning of May and June, we start to see a very cautious reopening, especially among bar visits. Most schools are still on summer vacation. Throughout the summer, bar visits continue a sporadic and heterogeneous increase. And finally, in August, we start to see schools begin to reopen. Now, what about consequences? This figure shows the share of the United States population living in a county where COVID cases are spreading at different rates. Red is accelerating growth rates, purple is a steady growth rate, and blue is declining growth rates. After the initial explosion of cases and associated lockdown, things have remained moderately steady aside from that peak in growth in midsummer. We can look at this at the county level too, but these are a lot of big data. How do we make sense of it all? What can we learn from it? As national security scientists, we ask what new understanding can inform policy and support a strong and resilient national recovery from COVID-19. And from a perspective of pure curiosity, what insight can we gain from the dramatic behavioral changes that we're living through in order to test theories that have thus far only been understood in aggregate? These figures show R0, a measure of disease spread that's tuned so that if it's greater than 1, the disease is spreading, and if it's less than 1, the epidemic is fading out. We can measure that in different regions, and then we can compare that to travel to see how R0 relates to people's travel behavior. Early on in the left panel, we see a positive relationship between spread and travel. Places that locked down faster and more intensely saw bigger reductions in spread. The lockdown worked. But then later in the summer, mobility started to increase again, and we didn't see a commensurate rise in spread. In fact, the relationship between travel and spread has the opposite sign. This suggests that something is different about where we're going or how we're behaving. We seem to have learned to move around and engage in many normal activities while still reducing COVID-19 spread. Maybe that's masks, maybe that's something else that we haven't come up with yet. But with work like this, we can better understand what is happening right now in order to make good decisions about what policies and behavioral strategies are working to keep Americans safe, and also build a better, safer future, so we're more protected from this pandemic and from future ones. Thank you. This research was supported by the DOE Office of Science through the National Virtual Biotechnology Laboratory, a consortium of DOE national laboratories focused on response to COVID-19, with funding provided by the Coronavirus CARES Act.
The great things you're seeing today on this program, all the exhibits and educational outreach, all those things require funding. We cannot fulfill the vast potential of AMSE without your help. The AMSE Foundation exists to support the work of the museum. I recently had a few moments to talk with Jim Campbell, the chairman of the AMSE board, about his vision for the museum and the future.
And every community needs a place to tell their story. And AMSE is the place to tell the Department of Energy's story, historically dating back from the Manhattan Project all the way to the present. And the story evolves and changes, and AMSE will do the same in the coming years. And it's an exciting kind of place because the things that happened here changed the world, and the story that we tell changes how we perceive our view of the past and our view of the future. The Manhattan Project was really 4 different experiments in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. 80-some thousand people were brought here to do that. They built a community here. 60+% of the money spent on the Manhattan Project was spent here. The headquarters of it was here. Our goal is to really make that story real and help people understand it better. Everybody has a different thought about museums, but my thought is this is our museum. I mean, the DOE kind of owns it, but that's a public entity as well. We want to tell our community's story in addition to the global story that it represents. The interesting thing about Oak Ridge and its story as far as what it does and its purpose, the people I meet in Japan, in Russia, in different parts of the world know more about Oak Ridge than I think people in East Tennessee do. So one of our goals is to really help the region and the state understand the asset that is Oak Ridge, and this museum's a perfect place to tell that story. The exhibits around us as we stand here today really reflect what's going on inside the fences of Oak Ridge today. We need you, we need people, we need volunteers to lead tours, we need docents here at the museum and at K25 Museum. We need money to enhance and grow exhibits. So if you've got resources that you feel like sharing with us, our classroom, our educational spaces, there's opportunities to invest in those. We need board members. We need people who are interested in helping us tell the story better. So let us know if you want to help, and we're always looking for good people that can tell the stories right, that can be investors in our future, that can be a part of a really dynamic place that's going to be an important part of the Oak Ridge community for a long time.
We're now really happy to be joined by Gene Patterson, Community Relations Lead at Y12, and Kristen Waldslager, who is the Education Outreach Specialist at Y12. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Let's start with Y12 in general. The Y12 National Security Complex. We're really happy here at AMSE to help tell that story, how it evolved over the years, the great work going on today. Gene, perhaps can you summarize for us what happens at Y12?
Well, I can just real quick brief history.
Yeah.
Started in '43, was part of the Manhattan Project. We did the enrichment of the uranium back during the Manhattan Project, which led to the first nuclear weapon. So that's how we began. And so over the decades, we are now a nuclear production facility, part of the nuclear deterrent for the United States. And we like to say that our mission is to keep America safe.
Yeah. I know that Y12 and AMSE have worked closely together over the years, and we're really proud of that partnership. That's been especially the case in education. Kristen, can you tell us some about how we work together in education and why you think that's so important?
I think it's really important to have a community that supports education. I think each of us has an important integral part to play, whether it's ORNL, Y12, or any of the other industries in the area. I think it's important for us to be able to support you as you offer programs for teachers and for schools and for homeschooling parents or just people in the community that are interested in building the heritage of Oak Ridge and its history to their children.
Yeah, it's been great to work with you all to do that with both the history and the science part. So the history is important, but teaching about STEM and STEAM is vitally important.
Well, and before she answers that question, because she is the expert, just real quick, what you bring up is exactly right. It is very, very important to us because what you all do here triggers the imaginations and excitements of children so that perhaps one day they might be the engineers and the scientists that we need at Y12 to continue our mission. So it's a wonderfully symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, they're that next generation stepping into those leadership roles and leading us to the great innovations of the future.
And one example of that was just this past year, one of my goals was to focus on how we could celebrate Nuclear Science Week. And I immediately thought of AMSE. I'd had experience working with Chris Light, someone that you guys had contracted before to go into classrooms. And it was just so easy for me to reach out to you guys and connect and to be able to pull out a program that all second graders in Oak Ridge schools, all seventh graders in Oak Ridge schools could have the access to someone coming into the classroom to do something that's hands-on and exciting to support the teacher and to support the students and to make science exciting for them.
I'm really proud of our team of educators here and working with great partners like you. Our role in this community in helping the students and teachers and educating everyone really as they come through these exhibits and our programs. I'm really, really proud of that part of what we do here. What are your memories of AMSE? throughout the years. I know you visited here before, not just in your professional roles.
You know, it's interesting. When they think of AMSE, they think of the young girl with her hand on the static ball or whatever that thing was, with her hair
the
sticking
Van de
out.
Graaff generator.
Right. See, so you would know the answer to that one. I knew. But, you know, so honestly, I was not that familiar with AMSE over the years, growing up down the road in Monroe County, but obviously I always knew about it. And since I've been here working in Oak Ridge, I've learned a lot more. And you know, the one thing that I really like to tell folks about AMSE is that it's a really cool place. It really is.
Well, thank you, Gene. Thank you.
In fact, at one point, the original site that you guys had, I was able to attend as a student going through Carnes Elementary School.
Yeah.
And then as I became a teacher at Carnes Elementary School, I was able to keep that same tradition and bring students there on a field trip. And that was actually one of the only places that you could really see what type of work happened at Y12. Unless you were an employee, you really didn't have an idea because it was a secret. So when you could go to that on that field trip and see, wow, they do some really cool stuff out here that puts your hair on end.
Exactly. Well, that's one of the great things about AMSE is all the school groups that come through here still to this day. We have great classrooms, even more new activities in those classrooms for students when they return. So it's a big part of what we do. And we've also been working a lot on the online educational component of what we do, of making resources available through videos and other resources online. So I'm really proud of that as well. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm excited about our partnership. I'm always impressed by what Y12 does, and we really appreciate you both.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks.
This is how kids explore magnetism at AMSE. By looking at a magnet, let's name this one. If it was on a horse's foot, I'd call this a horseshoe magnet. If you put your hand up to this, you can feel that it's a smooth plastic covering, but you really can't feel the magnetic force. This magnet, if it was made out of candy, let's call this a bar magnet, or a candy bar magnet. Well, when I put it on the other magnet, it actually sticks to it. And the kids are always interested in trying to feel that magnetic force. We can't feel the gravitational force, but we stay on Earth. We can't feel the magnetic force unless you have another magnet or a certain type of material. If you turned around, all of a sudden, even as an adult, I can't get them to attract to each other. That's called repulsion. So a horseshoe magnet and a bar magnet. This magnet is actually called a cow magnet, and veterinarians put it down in the stomach of a cow to pick up any bits of metal that they may eat when they're munching their hay. This container has a little bit of dark sand in it, a certain type of sand, and I shake it and it kind of makes what I call a woolly worm. Well, this is actually magnetic sand and it has iron in it. That's kind of the secret. Iron is the one type of metal that is magnetic. What if this was in the bakery counter at a store? Maybe we'd call this a donut magnet. Well, I'm going to put it on this pencil, put another one on the pencil, and is that magic or is that magnetism? If I turn it over, they'll be attracting each other. If I turn it around, they're repelling each other and actually floating. Can you imagine having a pair of shoes on a surface? You could do a moonwalk very easily. The experiment that the kids do is making an instrument called a magnometer with the attraction of a paper clip and a magnet. And they test different materials by going through this magnetic field. Obviously this cardboard isn't disrupting that magnetic field. The wooden tongue depressor isn't either. Let's try this piece of piece of paper. Oh, we know paper isn't magnetic, but it must have interfered with the magnetic force. Let's try this piece of copper. Didn't disrupt it. All metals are not magnetic, only those metals that have iron in them. Let's try this nail. Well, that disrupted the field, so this nail made out of steel probably has some iron in it. The key, although it's probably an alloy not having iron in it. So all these materials, the magnetic force went right through them, with the exception of the nail that had the iron in it. So kids learn that, I always quiz them about what type of material is magnetic, and we eventually get to iron. This is how kids explore magnetism at AMSE.
Jim Dotson is an Oak Ridge City Councilman and participates in a number of civics and arts groups, along with being an important part of the AMSE Foundation board. In his day job, Jim is a middle school art teacher. Embracing the 4 C's as the core of STEM and STEAM education has helped bolster his students' creativity, ability to solve problems, and see the world in a different light.
STEM, meaning science, technology, engineering, math, really didn't thrill me, to be honest with you. But until lately, I guess within the last 5 or 6 years, I heard that the 4 C's more clearly embraced the concept of STEM. Collaboration. We do that in visual art all the time. Communication. We have to do communication. We actually write about our artwork. We talk about our artwork. We do things like that. Creativity is part and parcel to art. We teach creativity in here all the time, and in critical thinking or problem solving. So when somebody mentioned the 4 C's as more clearly defining STEM, I felt like, well, the arts has been the perfect venue for conveying that STEM concept, and we always wanted to be on board with that. So while it's a new concept for some people, I think we've been practicing STEM in the schools here at Jefferson Middle School, the Oak Ridge schools, and the Oak Ridge community, science and arts here, for decades.
In middle school, students are really finding their way. They're becoming teenagers. Their brains have gone through a gigantic biological development, and if we restrict the way that they learn, then we are restricting their growth potential. And so by opening up all those doors in middle school, we give them the possibilities of seeing, this is what I love, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I'm great at, and the motivation of what they're great at can help them with the stuff that they have to work harder on. And so we want to provide those opportunities in middle school the best we can.
So we're just really trying to focus all of our students on that critical thinking part. STEM is not a one answer is correct area, so they have to really think outside the box in order to complete a STEM assignment. That emphasis helps them to be more career ready and college ready. So we emphasize that because it helps them to prepare for their future.
As a 6th grade math teacher, we get a lot of I can't do it, or I don't get it. If you get bogged down on one step, the rest of everything that you've done is going to end up being wrong. And that can really affect an 11 or 12-year-old who's been sitting there trying to get this for however many days, you know. That aha moment when they realize the mistake that they had been making the whole time was the same one little mistake, and they get it and then they fix it, and then all of a sudden the rest of their time, whether it's with division or another concept, they're like, hey, oh, I remember. I can find that one mistake, and I can get through it.
When they're using all different aspects, when they're incorporating different subject areas, different mediums into their work, we just see them really collaborating with others and just bringing in all different areas together. I actually do Rubik's Cubes with my 5th graders every year, and so they come to me and they think that, oh, we're just going to learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube, but every year they get very frustrated when they realize very quickly that it involves so many steps and so many different areas of their brain working together, so it's not an easy task. I think every single year I have almost all of my students thinking that there's no way that they can do it. And then by the end, when they can, they're just so proud of themselves, which I'm proud of them too. So I just see that turn on. They want to show other people, they want to show that off. So it's really cool.
If you try, you'd be surprised what you can do. So when they try in here and they kind of get engaged, they're kind of at a point where they go, you know what, I can actually do these things. And I think the fact that I'm using visual art to communicate some of the things with STEM or STEAM, I think that really does motivate them.
Confidence in math and in STEM and in all of this stuff that we're doing, when you're at the middle school level and you're going through all this that you're going through when you're 11, 12, 13 years old, confidence, it builds up in your entire life, your personality, the way you approach all the problems. So you realize, I can get through this because I remember I got through it in that ELA class, I got through it in that math class.
When we talk about something like a Rubik's Cube, they can do that when they don't think that they can. And I just hope that showing them something small like that and, you know, motivating them to push through and to do it shows them that they can apply that to many other things in their futures. So.
Our problem-based learning. If you can give a student a problem and they can see how all these pieces work together to solve that problem better than just one, I think that's the epiphany. I think we can continue to look at it as not science, technology, engineering, and math. You know, that acronym didn't really do it for me, and it didn't really do it for a lot of people. But when we talked about, okay, more along the lines of collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity, I thought, now that's more of a philosophy. That's more of something that we really could sink our teeth into and get behind. So when you say that, the arts are naturally going to be a part of that. It's always been and always will be a vehicle for teaching STEM.
Hi, my name's Miss Wright, and I'm with the Museum of Science and Energy. And today we're talking with Miss Catherine Baxter of Beaumont Magnet School in Knoxville. And we're going to talk a little bit about STEAM in general. We know STEAM, the acronym, has kind of changed over the past, 6-7 years from just STEM-based to incorporate arts as well into STEAM. So now most of the terminology is STEAM instead of just STEM. But Ms. Baxter, what do you all define STEM or STEAM at your school as?
So we do place the emphasis on science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And so it's really just a conglomeration of all of those used together to really emphasize real world problem solving.
And when you're looking at incorporating that into your math and your science classes, what type of technology are you using in those classes?
We've used a lot. That's really an area that has grown. Not only have we done Chromebooks, and we have now we are using 3D printers. We are using the Ozbots for graphing. And so we've been able to integrate a lot of technology into our learning.
And do the students seem to be responding to that with a lot of excitement and curiosity and build on that as they're learning?
Absolutely, because I think they're really able to see all of these processes and conceptual understanding that they see in the math class. They're really able to see it put to use. And so, for example, the Ozbots, they may see, okay, this is graphing, but when they're able to actually use the technology and the engineering to problem solve, then they're able to see, okay, this can be used in real life. And so I think that's such an important part, because that's the building block to them actually doing it in real life.
Right. Well, have you had some students that maybe have changed their mind about math or science since that's been incorporated? Because sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating. I have a 5th grader at home, and he's very intimidated by math. Science, not as much, because I can help him, a little bit more with it. But have you seen some kids kind of spark their excitement a little bit more?
Absolutely. I think that when they're able to see it in the real world, a lot of times when they are feeling insecure because they may not feel as confident with math, with numbers on a page, it may not make as much sense to them. But then when they're able to see it in real life and see that math isn't just a bunch of numbers, it is in our world everywhere, then they're really able to have confidence and think through, okay, this is more than just, a bunch of numbers. This is something that's actually a part of our real world, and you are going to use it every day. So, definitely.
Now, Beaumont is known to come to AMSE for their learning expeditions, as well as many other places in East Tennessee. I know you go to the Knoxville Zoo and other sites. But when you come to AMSE, do you feel like our programs, especially our classroom programs, do they seem to help your students in their STEAM curriculum?
Absolutely. I mean, even just looking at the classroom behind you, the students are really able to take what they're learning in class and they're able to apply it to hands-on experiments. They're able to see science in the real world. They're able to use resources that the teacher may not have in the classroom, but they're able to conduct experiments and see it, like I said, in real life. And so that's something that's so important for them.
We have been working on trying to develop some new activities for our students that are coming to visit. And we know that you're going to be doing a virtual visit with us soon, which is kind of new framework for us, but we're excited about it, using our telepresence robot and also sending some activities that you can still do hands-on there in class. But can you think of maybe other areas or ideas that AMSE could use to help benefit your classes and other teachers?
Well, I think, like you're saying, even just sending something to the students who are in person, I think that that's so important, and I'm so excited to continue that partnership and see what it looks like when it's virtual. And even just for our students who are at home and getting to watch those, I think that it's so cool just to get for them to be able to see it and see those real world experiences. And yeah, so I think that will be so important.
Do you all have an area in your school that's kind of like a makerspace? Are you familiar with makerspaces?
We do. We have a STEAM lab, but we don't have a makerspace set up in there. It's more in a structured format.
Is that something you think would be beneficial if we develop that at AMSE for students?
Absolutely. I think everyone benefits when students are able to use their creativity and to really get to experience that and not feel so constrained. I think the students are going to benefit, the community is going to benefit from that, so we would love to see that.
That's awesome. Let's see, I had a couple more questions on here. What do you think, or you predict, the focus in education is going to be as we move forward over the next 5 to 10 years in regards to STEAM in general?
You know, I think that we're going to really be continuing with what's been started very recently, is just focusing on those critical thinking skills. And it's no longer just rote memorization, but it's really critical thinking and problem solving. And I think that that's really where we're going to continue with engineering and integrating that.
That's true, because there's been so much technology that's been developed in general just over the past couple of years.
Right.
When you have virtual reality and augmented reality. Do you use any of those type of applications in your school?
We do have virtual reality glasses, yes. So we've been able to do that, and I think that is the coolest. I mean, whether they are going into an aquatic environment or into space, I think that is just so cool that kids are able to see. Again, I keep saying real life, but it's true, because they're able to experience things and not just hear about them or read about them. They're really able, I mean, it's the experience, so.
We recently put in some virtual reality stations here at the museum, and we hope to incorporate more into some of our classroom experiences. But it's true, you can travel the whole world and look at places without even leaving your classroom or your living room, depending on where you're located. So technology has really just basically went through an industrial revolution just in the past couple of years. So these students are going to have to face a lot more challenges than what even students 10 years ago faced.
Absolutely.
Because just keeping up with that science and that technology. Do you have any students who have come back to you and have possibly went into mathematics or went into an engineering field or a science field?
You know, most of my students are now in high school. That's the oldest that they are. But I do have students just at the STEM Academy, or students who are in like robotics clubs or science or math Olympiad. And so I know that I have a lot of students who have really taken an interest in that and have made that a part of their extracurricular activities. So absolutely.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you see more females going into science and technology fields?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a lot of females that are just so interested in it, and they are loving it just as much. So that's really great to see, and great to see that growth.
That is exciting, because I can remember when I was in college back a long time ago, I was one of 3 girls in our engineering classes. So to see that grow over the past 20, 30 years is exciting for me personally.
I'm sure.
But I want to thank you today for talking a little bit about STEM with us and STEAM. And we look forward to seeing Beaumont back here at the museum when we're open and working in our classes and seeing you again. So thank you, Ms. Britton, and I hope you have a great day.
Well, thank you. We are excited. We can't wait to come back. Bye.
Bye.
The American Museum of Science and Energy in Oak Ridge, Tennessee is an innovative and interactive experience rich in history and ingenuity. The story of the nation's oldest science and energy museum begins with the birth of the atomic age and the conclusion of World War II. Over 70 years later, we continue to showcase how resources birthed in war spearhead America's national laboratories and define how we as a people move into the future. 5 key color-coded themes allow guests to self-guide through the museum. The journey begins at the Manhattan Project. In 1939, Albert Einstein wrote to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, stating that recent developments in nuclear science could make possible the creation of a bomb of unimaginable power, and expressing the grave concern that the Nazis in Germany could be developing just such a weapon. This fear drove the greatest marshaling of industrial and scientific resources the world had ever known. In a few short years, the mission was completed with ferocious results and the promise of peace. During those years, Oak Ridge, Tennessee was born. An international scientific presence was established, a vibrant community was cultivated, racial segregation began to unravel, and a new vision for the future began to take shape. National security was a continued focus of Oak Ridge in the post-World War II era. Oak Ridge continued as an international leader in atomic exploration, as well as other ways to keep citizens safe. The community took and has continued to take lead roles in developing nuclear-powered submarines, disarming nuclear weapons worldwide, nuclear medicine, safety, logistics, and the atomic regulation necessary to establish a safer and better world for all people. Big science has always been in the forefront of the work at Oak Ridge. At the American Museum of Science and Energy, our Big Science exhibit highlights incredible past projects, including the development of various technologies responsible for modern cellular communication, and leaps forward into the future from nanotechnology and the world's fastest supercomputer to 3D printing and neutron research. The museum's Energy Leadership section is an exploration into how our lives are powered, showing how ORNL has pioneered work in nuclear energy, the next generation of solar, wind, and other possible power sources. Come and investigate its impact on your life with the dynamic energy grid activity. Also, learn about the power of plasma and touch the iconic plasma ball. The original work in Oak Ridge did not always consider the impact on the environment. Since then, Oak Ridge has pioneered solutions to past problems and led the way remediating the environment. Learn how researchers investigate new ways to clean and preserve our environment, and see the protective gear that they wear while they work.
Thank you so much for joining us today. As AMSE seeks to find its own financial path forward, we are tremendously grateful for your support. The AMSE Foundation, with continued support from DOE, has a goal of being even more involved in the management of this museum. It's their belief that the museum can continue to grow, improve, and inspire. With your help, this goal can be reached. The donate button at amse.org is going to stay active from now on, so please visit and support AMSE, and please support all of our local museums and businesses. Again, thank you so much for your support of AMSE. Let me add, okay.
Yeah, just give me a clean line. Say.
Thank you for your support, and then do that.
And then do all that shit.
Okay. Thank you so much for your support of AMSE. Let me do it again. And thank you so much for your support of AMSE. You can support us by going to amse.org and hitting the donate button, or you can call 865-294-4531, or you can mail checks, damn it. Don't say damn it. Or mail your checks. There you go, ready? Want me to start all over? Is that easier for you? I can do it all over.
I can put it over a graphic. It'll be fine. It would be great to have
Let me do it.
a shot of you.
I'll just say thank you. I'll just do it again. That's right. Thank you so much for your support of AMSE. You can support us by going to amse.org and clicking on the donate button. You can call 865-294-4531, or you can mail your checks to 115 Main Street East, Oak Ridge, Tennessee 37830. Thank you so very much for your support of the American Museum of Science and Energy.
Very good. Let's do that. Let's do that 2 more times.
Okay.
One just like this. As you're talking, smile a little bit more.
Oh yes, I was really intent.
Yes, and then as you finish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And then as you finish, just kind of.
Okay.
Just smile, put your
Okay.
hands down, and look pleasant for a moment.
All right. Okay, ready?
Okay. I'm gonna do one with this perspective. It's tighter, and then I want to do one that's a little bit wider.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And
thank you so much for your support of the American Museum of Science and Energy. You can give us your support by going to amse.org and clicking on the donate button, or you can call 865-294-4531, or you can mail your checks to 115 Main Street East in Oak Ridge, Tennessee 37830. We are deeply grateful for your support of the American Museum of Science and Energy.